The first night's the toughest. No doubt about it. They march you in naked as the day you were born. Skin burning and half blind from that delousing shit they throw on you. And when they push you in that cell, and those bars slam home, that's when you know it's for real. Old life blown away in the blink of an eye. Nothing left but all the time in the world to think about it.
That's it, my beloved truth seekers. That's where we were cast, where we are living, and where we must hope to get out from. It is what it is. We are in a prison. So happy heresies. We are the Gnostics, sailing the seas of fate through the gnashing rocks of Orthodoxy, crucified in time and space, all of us a bound Prometheus, for all eternity until we realize our transcosmic potential. And thus we can transcend into the cross of light from the cross of dead wood representing the dead animal condition, and rise into the realms of dreams and imagination.
It's the weirdest thing. I feel like I've been in a coma for about 20 years, and I'm just now waking up.
C.G. Jung once wrote that humans are gods suffering from laziness, amnesia, and nightmares. Ralph Waldo Emerson also wrote that a man is a god in ruins. But nonetheless, a supernal, pure shard of God, the one of Plato and the known father and mother of the Gnostics, dwells deep into the grottos of our souls, our memories, and reflected in everyone we have ever loved. Like Pink Floyd sang, "I am you and what I see is me." God is in the rain. God is in every blade of grass. God is the light that the darkness does not recognize but nonetheless covets. And when we separate the light from the darkness, God from the illusion, the indwelling hero from the matrix, put them before us so we can begin making the right life choices for a change, we can transfigure ourselves into the children of the treasury of light. That is the process of gnosis, or knowing oneself, and knowing the divine. Not just knowing, but experiencing oneself in the divine, a more authentic reality behind all the camouflages, the powers and principalities laid over our eyes like silky veils of denial.
Trust the gods, Leonardo.
I'd prefer you trusted your reason.
Nothing new that you haven't heard before. Easier said than done. I am no better than you. I am a lost stranger like you in a world I didn't create. I am just planting some seeds and trying to imperfectly find my way home like all of you. But the important thing is that we each find our own path towards wholeness and harmony with everything that was, is, and will be. But one point we can all meet and agree on is the place we call the truth, the deeper truth, the scathing and unbearable truth. Once we arrive together, there is nothing to do anymore but walk with honesty as our shepherd. And honesty is the best way to know yourself and know God. But the path of profitable spirituality is brutal, a domain even angels and demons fear to tread.
This tape is a lightning bolt from God. It can change things that need changing before we all go off the end of the road.
Again, quoting C.G. Jung, "For many, the rewards of clinging to spiritual infancy in the name of fidelity or commitment to a final revelation are too great to be abandoned. The security of certitude, of possessing the final truth as a member of the chosen people, a people set apart, simply outweighs the pain of disorientation that invariably accompanies the risk of growth."
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Thus we travel to the virtual Alexandria, 2 coffee, cigarettes, and Gnosis on this approximately October 6, 2007. Your psychopomp being none other than the celestial incarnation called Abraxas. And in this intersection of the truth and spiritual awareness, we face today what they call the mystery religions, the precursors of so many philosophies, ideologies, and theologies, including Gnosticism and Judaism. To expand further, we have one of my favorite scholars, freethinkers, and truth seekers, Acharya S., author of The Christ Conspiracy, Sons of God, and the upcoming Who Was Jesus? Fingerprints of the Christ. She has honored coffee, cigarettes, and Gnosis before, so many of you know that Acharya does not play hot potato with the truth. She does not winch at the controversial or radical, because some people are destined to be pioneers of the Holy Land of Liberation.
I'm the saint of blasphemy.
Like the Gospel of Thomas says, first you will be disturbed and then you'll be amazed. And the mystery religions are a source of so much amazement. Since the beginning of man's rise out of the primate stew, there have always been those with higher spiritual tastes. These were revered as shamans or wise women. Man understood and respected those with a keener vision into the supernatural world, a far cry from the last few thousand years where we call these individuals crazy, controversial, or just dangerous enough to be burned at the stake.
We don't want cooperation. We want conversion. We want repentance.
As civilization grew, these individuals blossomed and invited those who wanted direct experience with the sublime and transcendental to join them in a journey of death and resurrection, pathos and mysticism, and personal knowledge of the unknown. These were the mystery schools or mystery religions or mystery cults. They were often vilified by the Orthodox that knew this kind of transformed human could not be controlled because they were free from the chains of society and their stern, lawful, neutral gods. Yet they survived across the known world until crushed under the heel of Orthodoxy and its various embodiments.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
And that is ironic because at its heart, Christianity is a mystery religion. It follows all the motifs you find in the mystery schools, especially the rising, dying Godmen eternal saga, the need for trust and faith and experience, the end of the fear of death, the evolution of the soul into the pastures of love and compassion, just to name a few. And taking it deeper, true and nude Christianity is simply Gnosticism in essence. And Gnosticism is a mystery school pregnant with Platonic ideals, depth psychology, and eternal rewriting and reinterpretation of myths and allegories.
Well, I've wrestled with reality for 35 years, Doctor, and I'm happy to state I finally won out over it.
St. Paul, as we've more than alluded before, founded a mystery school based upon a Jewish demigod named Joshua Christ. He was both a Gnostic and a mystic. Timothy Freke and Peter Gandhi explained it well in the Jesus Mysteries. The same goes with Chaim Makam in his brilliant book about Paul the Mythmaker, or Tom Harper's The Pagan Christ, David Feidler's Jesus Christ, Son of God, and of course Acharya's assorted works. And there are many other books. Read those and then drop me a line if you want more, my beloved truth seekers. The evidence can no longer be denied. Or if you just don't have the time or cash to go to Acharya's website, truthbeknown.com, again, that is truthbeknown.com, and type mystery religion in a search box, you'll find an avalanche of reading on this topic.
Hellfire is burning me alive!
He's burning.
The mystery religion angle has certainly been carefully hidden from the Pauline corpus. One example is the word perfect, mature, or elect you see in the mythmakers' writings in modern flawed Bibles. The Greek word is teleio, which correctly means initiate. For example, you might look at 1 Corinthians 2, and it should read, "Among the initiates we do impart Sophia, although it is not a Sophia of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are doomed to pass away, but we impart a sacred and hidden Sophia of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glorification." And there are abundant words and phrases from the 13th Apostle that are direct parallels to mystery school lingo.
No more tricks. No more lies, only truth.
There are hints of this veracity even in the writings of the Church Fathers. If secret mark is true, a point that scholars are still locking horns on, then we have Clement of Alexandria explaining that there were 2 types of Gospels written in antiquity. One was for the exoteric, the people that Jesus said needed parables. The other was a secret gospel for those who were initiated into the deeper mysteries of the new religion known as Christianity. In other words, Christianity was always meant to be a faith of levels and maturity, not a blanket form of sustenance like fast food spirituality for the common masses.
I give you the Buddy Christ.
Remember those books I mentioned for clues that are prevalent even in the Gospels for mystery religion kernels. After all, as you're probably sick to hear by now, the Christ is but the personification of death and rebirth, and eventual transcendence into all aspects of the multiverse, nature, all life on earth, the reincarnation of souls, and the movement of the heavens. Jesus never was but always is. Call him Dionysus, Helios, Mithra, Osiris, King Arthur, Neo, Elvis Presley, you and your daily struggle. It's all the same.
Kind of takes the fun out of being alive, doesn't it?
Like Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, number 62. Jesus said, I disclose my mysteries to those who are worthy of my mysteries. And the Gospel of Philip also says, the Lord did everything in a mystery, a baptism and a chrism, and a Eucharist, and a redemption and a bridal chamber. He said, I came to make these things below like the things above, and the things outside like those inside. I came to unite them in the place, here through types and images. And it was Plutarch who said, the highest of our initiations in this world is only a dream of the true vision of initiation of death. The mysteries have been carefully conceived to awaken memories of the sublime things to come.
Neo, sooner or later you're going to realize, just as I did, there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path.
Judaism isn't excused from the mystery cults. After all, in the Old Testament, Ezekiel complains that the woman in Jerusalem wailed at the death of Tammuz, another rising and dying godman. The goddess Asherah, an avatar of the mystery school female principal Demeter, Persephone, or Hecate, is hidden but apparent in the Jewish Bible as well. Philo of Alexandria writes that Jews participated in the festivals of Osiris and Horus, so it should be apparent or at least acceptable that throughout their history, when Jehovah wasn't showing them his love with his fists, the Jews participated in the mystery religions. And many of these Jewish heretics later became the Sethians and Ophites, the pre-Christian Gnostics. And we've only scratched the surface. It's a topic in which there is so little information, but from what we do have takes us into a land of milk and honey, full of amazement, like it said in the Gospel of Thomas. So let's get underneath the surface with our interview with Acharya S.
Yes. Sir, what if the writer is attempting to create a story where nothing much happens, where people don't change, they don't have any epiphanies, they struggle and are frustrated and nothing is resolved? More a reflection of the real world.
The real world?
Yes, sir.
The real fucking world. First of all, you write a screenplay without conflict or crisis, you'll bore your audience to tears. Secondly, nothing happens in the world? Are you out of your fucking mind? People are murdered every day. There's genocide, war, corruption. Every fucking day, somewhere in the world, somebody sacrifices his life to save somebody else. Every fucking day, someone somewhere takes a conscious decision to destroy someone else. People find love. People lose it. For Christ's sake, a child watches a mother beaten to death on the steps of a church. Someone goes hungry. Somebody else betrays his best friend for a woman. If you can't find that stuff in life, then you, my friend, don't know crap about life. And why the fuck are you wasting my 2 precious hours with your movie? I don't have any use for it. I don't have any bloody use for it.
Okay, thanks.
With us today to discuss the mystery religions and cults is definitely one of my favorite scholars, my favorite all-time true seeker and free thinker, and my baby doll, Acharya S. How you doing today?
Thank you for that stellar introduction. I'd say you're my favorite interviewer, but then the other people will cry. So.
Yes, the
you
egos.
definitely provoked some very good stuff out of me.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
You're a great interviewer. You're very knowledgeable and just all around wonderful.
All right, thank you. Well, the interview's over. That's all I wanted to hear.
Now just play that about 10 times.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Call it a day.
There you go. Okay. Anyway, what, as far as you know, or as you write in the Sons of God, the origins of the mystery religions are basically a natural reaction to the esoteric faiths, right?
Well, that's hard to say, because which came first, the chicken or the egg? Let's introduce the book Sons of God just a minute, because it's not as popular as, hasn't been as popular as my younger sister, or older sister, I should say, Christ Conspiracy, which was my first book that got widespread distribution. Sons of God, subtitled Krishna, Buddha, and Christ Unveiled, is a response, in large part, to the commentary and criticisms of Christ Conspiracy. But it also outlays the history of religion going back as far as I could detect it. We're talking tens of thousands of years ago, up to 30,000 years ago, in artifacts that are found around the globe in caves and, of course, buried, and also monuments that are much younger than that. But such things as the Lascaux caves, a lot of people are familiar with them, with the pictures of exquisitely drawn illustrations of animals. There have also been found star maps. There are artifacts of the Venus of LaSalle, for example, the goddess figure holding a half moon. And so this is why I say it's difficult to tell which came first, chicken or the egg, because these oldest artifacts seem to indicate, in reality, that the mysteries were the order of the day. That, in other words, if you project yourself back in time as far as you can go mentally, try to imagine what the world was like, say, 30,000 years ago. You remove, of course, all the civilization, all the buildings. There would be some type of civilization. It wasn't necessarily all cavemen going on. We have a high intellect in just the species itself. There's no reason to believe that there were not geniuses among the earlier Homo sapiens. Now, going back perhaps 200,000 years, certainly they had the same cranium, the same brain capacity, so the same brain size. So we would expect to find more than grunting cavemen, and indeed we do. We find this incredible art, and in many caves in Europe that were well hidden until the last century or so. And within these caves, there seems to have been a strong ritualistic atmosphere. So it wasn't just somebody going in and saying, hey, I think I'll paint a picture in here. I mean, who the heck would paint a picture in a cave that was barely accessible? And the extent that these images cover in these caves up into the ceilings is quite a monumental effort. Now, also, with that kind of artistic expression, there must have been an ability there must have been leisure time. These were not just people who were out hunting, gathering all day just for subsistence. Somebody was supporting these individuals, these artists. And along with, of course, we also have burials in caves, and it has a great deal to do with a spiritual and supernatural world. That is what we can discern from it. It was extremely important what they were doing in the caves. And then I believe that there's evidence even from texts, much more recent texts, of course, like the Rig Veda, the Indian text, sacred text dating from at least 3,500 years ago, that talk about secret initiations in caves. And they describe also this goddess holding a half moon, which is pretty much the Venus of LaSalle. So we have this imagery that seems to extend around the world that is mysteries related, that is also related to astronomy, or as we incorporate that with religion, it becomes astrotheology. We seem to have astrotheological imagery and expressions dating back tens of thousands of years. And as we can discern from the history of the priesthood, this knowledge was not for the layman, for the vulgar. It was arcane and to be held by the elite. Priests and kings were inseparable in certain eras and areas, and so the ruler had this knowledge that they could mystify the rest of the people with. That those were all mysteries; those are secrets. They would be able to, when it came down to the agricultural age, being able to predict the seasons, the movements of the stars and the sun and the moon, planets. These were all mysteries that the priest kings held over the heads of their subjects. So as far back as we can go, we find mysteries associated with religion, the supernatural, mysticism, metaphysical concepts. Burials, even of Neanderthal, indicate that there was a concept of mysticism and the supernatural involved there. So even with the most primitive ancient man, we have a religious connotation, a mystery in the passage of human beings into the other world, the afterlife.
And Acharya, from Sons of Gods, you say that the mystery schools weren't isolated. Well, once eventually civilization advanced in the cities and all that, but eventually they became a great network that extended from Europe all the way to India. What's some of the evidence of this?
Again, we project ourselves back into history, and let's start moving forward. We've got these mysteries going on in caves. And oddly enough, as I said, we get the Venus of Lucelle, for example, which was found in Europe. And yet, in the descriptions in India, we have, in the ancient Indian texts, I believe in the Rig Veda, a description of the goddess holding the half moon. Very similar iconography. There have also been correspondences between some of the other imagery that we find in caves that we also find in texts that are much later as far as when they were actually physically written down. And then, of course, the one thing that keeps getting overlooked in the research regarding the spread of culture around the globe is the Indo-European, the very word itself. We have Indo-European languages. Within linguistics, it's commonly known that there's a correspondence between Indian languages and European languages. And this dates back at least 3,000 years when it seems, well, even prior to that, we have a root language, you could call it Vedic, that eventually spawned Sanskrit and Greek and Latin. And from Greek and Latin, several other languages. Of course, from the Latin, we have the Romance languages of French, Spanish, Portuguese. Those are all traceable to India, or at least to languages in India. Now, if the language is common at a certain point, then we can also assume that other concepts that go along with culture are common, including religion. So one of the primary pieces of evidence for these correspondences between religious iconography and ideology is language, and that cannot be ignored. Even ancient Irish, so close to Sanskrit that it blew the minds of the Western researchers who finally came across Sanskrit. They said, well, this is ancient Irish. So
yeah, I think, do you mind me interrupting for a second? Yeah, don't you mention that in Ireland they found people that were worshiping Hermes and Buddha?
Yeah, the word for Buddha in China, for example, is Fo. And they find variations of the word, not just Fo, but also Buddha, all kinds of different variations of this can be found from maybe that whole area, from China to Ireland. And there's a whole, the history of Ireland is very interesting because it appears to be that there were waves of different peoples going there, and that nonetheless it became isolated enough that certain aspects of culture were well preserved that were extremely old. And you have traditions in mythology describing what appears to be Ireland going back well over 2,000 years, 3,000 years. So there's a strong connection between Ireland and then you have Iran, the whole Aryan thing going on. It gets really fascinating, the mixture. There's also been found in China, Irish people wearing tartans, 3,000 years, mummies of red-headed Caucasians.
Wow.
Takla Mon, something like that. Now, the Chinese don't like anybody to know about that.
Not much else either.
Political reasons.
Yeah.
Hey, the white people in China, Chinese closed doors. There's never been anybody here but us. Then we go into the Gobi Desert and stories of Lemuria, but that's a whole different show. Well, that would have to do with mystery schools too, but yeah, the symbols are found that correlate between the evidence of where mystery schools have traveled, the symbols and language, and of course just concepts and ideas. For example, within the mystery schools, we have a common thread that revolves around death and resurrection. That is so archaic. I mean, that is what these caves are designed to do, as far as we can tell. The caves and the burials, going back tens of thousands of years, have to do with an afterlife. Have to do with an afterlife, then we're talking about a resurrection. There was a study done of the clan of the cave bear, Ursa, that had this whole death and resurrection theme. The god is sent to Earth, and he's a bear, and he's killed and resurrected. This is, I think, the one researcher believed that we were talking about 50,000 years ago.
Wow.
This death and resurrection theme. It seems to be just a natural phenomenon that occurs within the human mind. And you can see why it would be, because we have cycles on planet Earth, cycles that correspond with nature, natural cycles. The sun rises every day, sets every day. The moon has its phases. The seasons, the world turns around. When people understood that is a matter of debate. But so you could understand where the death and resurrection concept came forth, and that it is very old and well predates the Christian era, and was not just all of a sudden discovered in the minds of men through divine revelation 2,000 years ago. Long predating it.
But, like all the, sometimes a lot of the neo-pagans or neo-Gnostics run around going, oh, the beautiful mystery religions and this and that. But all the mystery religions, or a lot of them, really had a dark underside. I mean, a lot of times it was just, it became a tool to exploit man, wasn't it?
Well, they incorporated just about everything within the spectrum of humankind. So, of course, there was a lot of darkness involved there. One of the principal themes within the mystery religions was the sacrifice of the God King. So human sacrifice was very prevalent, even with the Druids. The modern pagans don't want to hear that, but the fact remains that there was human sacrifice within Druidism. And that human sacrifice goes back thousands of years. That is a central theme of mystery religions. And I maintain that that is what we are seeing in the gospel story. We are seeing an expose of your typical mysteries. Somebody, a group of people got together and they kind of conglomerated all the mysteries, and then they turned them inside out and made them exoteric. What was esoteric became exoteric. Paul even says at a certain point, what was previously a mystery is now made known to the world. And I also maintain that that's why the Christians, however many there were, who were persecuted, because the martyrdom stories are inflated, as we can imagine.
Oh yeah.
That the people who were killed for blathering, for speaking, or just saying Christian doctrine out loud, were actually killed because they were exposing the mysteries, and they were not supposed to be doing that. When you were initiated into a mystery school, you took a blood oath, capital offense. You go out and tell anybody what's going on inside the mystery schools, and they have a right to kill you. So now we have Christians standing on street corners, blathering the mysteries. Somebody's going, okay, you're going to die. So then we have, oh, they killed me because of my faith. When in fact, what happened is, now again, I want to make sure everybody's got the proper setting here. The one thing that leads to so much misunderstanding in the field of comparative religion and mythology is that we don't have the proper atmosphere established for where Christianity emanated from. In other words, the impression is given, you watch TV and you see these movies, or you read a book about the era. First of all, it claimed that it came from the small, tiny, 90-mile strip in Judea,
right,
Israel, Palestine area. That all of this stuff was brand new and fresh and totally unaffected by anything else, all just emanated out of that little space, and we just had these pious people with their robes and their sheep and whatnot, and yet the reality is that the world of that time, all around that era and even in that area, was fairly sophisticated. We had right next door to Judea, where this story supposedly took place, the gospel story. We had the Library of Alexandria and the University of Alexandria, 500,000 volumes of text from around the known world. We had of course, we had already, for 500 years at that point, we had the great buildings of Athens. We had the Roman Empire, much more sophisticated than a bunch of shepherds waiting for light to shine on them. Such a ludicrous perception of the ancient world. But if that's your perception of the ancient world, you are not going to be able to either grasp what I'm saying or accept it as factuality. Here are the facts. Sophisticated in material knowledge, for example, with the building, the arch and the Acropolis, fabulous buildings by that time. Oh, let's not forget the Great Pyramid. So much of what was being built all over Egypt. Egypt was massively built up by that time. Babylon had its fabulous building already, 500 years before this era. More than that. And then we had Sumeria, long before that. We had the civilization of Crete, which was very sophisticated, very civilized, starting 2500 BC. And so this idea that there was just a bunch of cavemen and shepherds running around is completely ludicrous. Now you have to put this within its proper setting, and we've got just a slew of religious concepts already in existence, emanating out of Egypt. There's a lot of religious concepts in Egypt. There's thousands of texts to this day that have survived from that era. All over the buildings are hieroglyphics describing religion. And as many people have remarked, there is almost nothing unique about Christianity that cannot be found in these pre-Christian cultures. Add to that these mystery schools, the evidence of which shows that they are in all the way from the Ireland to China, that all in between, and of course even in the Americas. As to when the mystery schools were in full force there, that's another debate. But there's evidence that they are the pre-Christian era certainly there, but also before what we call the Christian era, 0 or 1 AD or
right.
CE. It's another thing that needs to be defined is when exactly is the Christian era, because it didn't happen just, if Christ was a real figure and he was born, did you go, oh, here's the Christian era, boom. The fact is that the Christian era in Rome was later than the Christian era in, say, Antioch, which was centuries earlier than the Christian era in Great Britain. There's debate about that, when exactly the Christians arrived in Great Britain, but certainly it wasn't until the 3rd or 4th century before there was any kind of serious influence. And then in such places as Lithuania, Christianity didn't become a major force in Lithuania until like the 14th or 15th century. The Christian era in Lithuania was not until the 15th century, nor was it in Central America till the 15th century. You can't call it, if you say pre-Christian, well, it's pre-Christian in the 15th century in Central America. So whenever somebody says, well, you can't prove that's pre-Christian, they think that we're talking about 1 CE, 1 AD, 1 CE. That's inaccurate. But in any event, what you have all around the Mediterranean during the era when Christianity started to be formulated, you have these mystery schools already established. They've been in existence for hundreds of years and possibly even thousands of years if you look at such places as the Samothracian mysteries, which supposedly originated with the Pelasgians of Greece, the pre-Greeks, Proto-Greeks, actually before the Greek race had been there. That we could be talking 3,500 years ago in Greece. So by the time 2,000 years ago, we had a long history of mystery. And there were actually accounts of roving bands of proselytizers of the god Dionysus, the Orphics, wandering around and putting on religious plays. So we have groups of mystery school initiates traveling around the Mediterranean. And interestingly enough, in Samothrace, the main god was Dionysus, which is a dialect of Greek that corresponds to Iesus, named Jesus. So, and this Iasius was born of Zeus Pateras, God the Father, possibly a virgin, but certainly it was a miraculous conception or a divine birth. He's the founder of the mysteries in Samothrace, Iasius, also known as Jesus, prior to the Christian era. So you have a divine son of the Father God founding this religion in Samothrace centuries prior to the Christian era, who happens to be essentially named Jesus. And there are wandering proselytizers for this mystery religion of Jesus all over the Mediterranean. As you know, you may have read, you read the Mysterious Brotherhood chapter in Sons of God, which is like 60 pages.
Yeah, it's an opus.
Oh man, I was reading it, I was going, this is a lot of material.
Yeah, I wrote this.
Yeah, I wrote this. I know, it's amazing. Of course, I don't think any author who writes nonfiction like that can recall. I mean, 50% of it, maybe that was
yeah, no kidding.
That's a very dense book, thank God. Eh?
Yes, it is. I mean, you leave no stone unturned. But Acharya, we do, according to Sons of God, and well, obviously, and other scholars, we do have a direct link, or the closest link to Christianity. And aren't they the Therapeutae of Alexandria? You even mentioned how Eusebius, in one of his few moments of honesty, even admits that the Therapeutae were the first Christians.
Yeah, Eusebius, the church historian.
You want to call him that?
Constantine. Well, he's what we have to go by. So, yeah, he's trying to give some kind of authority and antiquity to the scriptures. And by his time, the scriptures really referred to the New Testament. And he claims that the Therapeutes were the originators of these texts. They had short allegorical works that the Gospels were based on. Now, that's a rather astonishing admission. First of all, allegorical works? What is it? What? You mean it's not a true story? It's allegorical? It's not to be taken literally? It's symbolic? It's, metaphysical, mystical? Gnostic? Oh, my. So that's the first astonishing admission. The second, of course, is that this is a mystery school in Egypt. So you're telling me that the Christian religion emanated out of Egypt? What? Well, then, that's the contention of a lot of people, because they've been able to see the similarities between Christianity and the older Egyptian religion, including some of the gods such as Osiris and Horus, and then there's the Isis figure holding the baby Horus, and then you also have Antioch, which is very important in the creation of Christianity, and out of Antioch comes this fellow named Apollonius, who we've had another show about.
Yes.
And he's apparently dragging into the picture Indian texts. There's all this Indian influence going on in the Roman world, which almost nobody talks about. Did you know that they found a statue of Lakshmi, the Indian goddess of, I think it's luck, good fortune, at Pompeii?
No, you're kidding. Wow.
Yeah. There was quite a bit of Indian influence in Rome. And, it's to be expected. I mean, we have this idea that this all happened in this little tiny place in Judea and Bethlehem, and the whole rest of the world has no relevance. And that is, in my book, an absolutely erroneous depiction that has led to all of the misunderstandings that we have. Instead, we had an extremely open cultural exchange going on, facilitated by, of course, the Roman Empire, but also prior to that would be Alexander, happened to go to India. And but even prior to that, we had a Silk Road going on. There's spices, the spice trade going from India to Rome. And there's all kinds of Indian influence, or should I say cultural exchange between India and the Roman world going on during the first centuries of what we call the Christian or Common Era. But I never finished this dark side of the mysteries.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Which, of course, was the human sacrifice.
Right.
And that's really blatant, obviously blatantly dark. And, of course, where does that come from? It's the cyclical, natural, the nature-worshipping, that God somehow wants blood to be spilled in order to provide fecundity or fertility. And this human sacrifice was carried out, I mean, you can't even imagine how many times. I don't think we could count how many times it was carried out all over the ancient world. It's really kind of one of the most common things you find in ancient religion. And the Bible practically opens up with it. Abraham is about to kill his son. Now, nobody blinks an eye. I mean, isn't that kind of strange? No, that's so accepted that Abraham was going to go and kill his son.
Yeah, I've always wondered about that.
It was accepted because it was being done.
Right.
And I mean, there was no. Why would you start with such a dramatic motif if it wasn't commonly done and commonly known? And there was no explanation to the people who were being addressed in this book. Like, hey, this is a really weird thing, and nobody could figure out why he was doing it. Nobody says that. They just go, and so the Lord commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, and it's understood that. Oh yeah, okay,
Yeah, and it not only happens in that. I mean, if you look, and I know it's kind of been whitewashed, but Joshua sacrificed some virgins, and then Samuel sacrifice a king in front of Saul. I mean, it's all over the Old Testament if you really look at it.
The Old Testament is covered in blood. I mean, and they're always believing that everything that they do, it's megalomania. Everything they do has something to do with God. So when they slaughter the 30,000 Midianites, that's a human sacrifice. It's a massive human sacrifice. And I mean, it goes on and on and on. Every other page has got somebody being murdered. There's the 5 kings of Ai, as you said, Joshua. He hangs the five kings of Ai. That's 5 kings, Anyway, you know that story.
Yeah. Joshua was a badass. Don't mess with him.
Yeah, Joshua. And the name happens to be Jesus.
Yeah, he was the Jesus. It happens
to be. If you're reading the New Testament in the translated Greek, the Septuagint, the Old Testament, I should say, the word Joshua is Jesus.
Yeah.
So all throughout, prior to the Christian era, anyone who spoke Greek, there were loads of Jews in the diaspora who spoke Greek. And anyone who was listening to the scriptures in Greek, reading them in Greek, in the Old Testament, I should say, scriptures, they would be hearing the story about Jesus. Jesus did this, and Jesus did that. Jesus was the great Redeemer and Savior who brought the Israelites into the Promised Land. Oh, well, hey, could we, maybe we're just carrying on the same tradition here with Jesus of the New Testament, perhaps?
Right. So I mean, it's pretty apparent that there was probably a very big Joshua mystery cult going around all over the Levant.
Exactly. And then within the non-Jewish world as well, we have this Iasios Jesus, i.e., mystery cult. So it all points to a fictional character based on what was already there in both, saying and deed, all the sayings, the logia Jesu, the sayings of Jesus. Well, there happens to be a book, pre-Christian book. It's actually contained in the Catholic Bible to this day. It's called Ecclesiasticus, so-called The Wisdom of Jesus. And some of the sayings in that book are very similar to the sayings of the Jesus in the New Testament. But that text, The Wisdom of Jesus, dates from the 2nd century BC. It's a translation by the grandson named Jesus of a guy named Jesus. So all these Jesuses prior to the Christian era, and they're saying all these sayings, the wisdom sayings. These are things I bring out in both Christ Conspiracy and Sons of God. Sons of God has quite an extensive discussion of the Jesus-Joshua connection. Anybody interested in that and any of the topics we're talking about today, the Sons of God book is where you want to go. It's pretty extensive on these subjects. So anyway, we have the human sacrifice aspect of the mysteries, and that's why almost nobody knows that it was so prevalent. You go into primitive cultures, even to this day in some areas, there's still this human sacrifice ritual. But let's say in the late 19th century, in India, they found the same kind of human sacrifice as described in the New Testament, that had nothing to do with Christianity, had never been influenced by Christianity, where a guy is hung up on a tree with a crossbar attached to his arms, and he's stabbed in the side. He represents God. So it's the same thing. And he's representing God. He's a scapegoat. His sins are upon him. His death is redeeming. His death is fecundating. It will bring life and fertility to the people. And that is the whole basis, in my opinion, for the gospel sacrifice. I believe it is an allegorical, archetypical, and fictional account that was designed to put an end to this common practice of human sacrifice. That they were once and for all, okay, it's been done, don't have to do it again. But this was being done so often, and I believe within the mysteries of Judaism it was being done. And that this was one of the reasons why the gospel story was created, was because they wanted to end this practice. Certainly it was being done by the non-Judaic cultures within the Roman Empire, up into Europe, for example. We have accounts of it. And so that's one dark aspect of the mystery. Now, another thing that they did within the mysteries that could be considered dark was the whole point of the mysteries is to get you to transcend your reality. You thought you were going to see God, you were going to experience the Godhead, you were going to be one with divinity. That is the stated goal of the mysteries. And so one of the ways to do that is to scare the crap out of you. So there was a real traumatization going on. And they did other things, of course. They used drugs. Sex was another device. And then bright light. And we find Paul talking about seeing Jesus as a bright light. That was already a common mystery experience. And remember, the word Jesus was representative of a number of different aspects of what I call the God Son. But it all comes down to the sun, which is what the bright light. The epithets of the sun, Jesus, Jason, Yasios, i.e. These are all epithets of the sun. And so the central figure of the mysteries in many eras and areas was the actual physical sun, S-U-N, as a symbol of death and resurrection. Because the sun is, as we from our perspective, it is eternal, it is extremely powerful, it comes and goes, it dies and resurrects every day, and yearly as well. As it gets in the northern hemisphere, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The days get shorter, I should say. The sun appears to be losing its power. And then, of course, on around December 25th, the third day of the winter solstice, it is resurrected. It is reborn. Whee!
Yeah.
There's great celebrations going back thousands of years. Winter solstice celebrations appear to be at least 5,000 years old, probably more, much more than that. This idea of Christmas being related to a Jewish guy, pretty sketchy. It is the winter solstice. It is the birth of the sun. And all of this is part of the mysteries. Yeah, the mysteries have been utilized to manipulate the masses because of the very thing we're talking about, where they were turned inside out and they were depicted as having taken place on Earth. The historicization within Christianity is not the first that it was done, of course, because even you have the stories of Hercules. Hercules was on Earth, wandering around, doing his thing with his 12 labors, 12 disciples, 12 labors. And then you have all the other gods that supposedly took birth on planet Earth. That's the same kind of bewilderment, if you will, but that's, to put it kindly, we would claim as deceit that the priests have been up to all along. They say that Hercules really existed and he walked the earth and he did this stuff, and the priests would know that this is all allegory or fiction. They're told that within the mysteries, but they would tell the exoteric followers, the lay public, that, this really happened over here. Mount Olympus has happened, and so on and so forth. So to that extent, the mysteries have been used to befuddle the masses and control them and make them do, everything. They've marched off to war in the name of these fictional characters, left and right. Still today, we'll be doing it. We're on the verge of total global destruction because of these very issues.
But if these mystery religions and this priesthood and secret brotherhoods were kind of the men behind the curtains and all that, didn't they get crushed by Christianity itself?
Yes. Eventually, all of this stuff was there was a stop put to it, and so in the name of Christianity, of course. And then the insistence that all that was evil and had nothing to do with Christianity, but in fact you can see pretty much every single major tenet and detail of Christ's supposed life can be found within the mystery religions, as well as, of course, just the exoteric mythology that was being taught to the masses. So, yeah, you talk about Eleusis in Greece, where I've been on a number of occasions, and it sort of breaks my heart because this bizarre Orthodox cult just completely slimed over that country and buried up the classical period.
Another one, which is pretty intriguing, and again, for the listeners, Acharya gives so much evidence. Good luck with it. Good luck trying to counter it. But you say that the Freemasons are really a very ancient, pre-Christian organization, right?
This is one of the most fascinating parts of the mysteries that almost nobody can get into very, very well, because they keep trying to separate the crafts from religion. In other words, we have masonry combined with religion. We have carpentry combined with the religion. We have smithcraft, which is metalworking, combined with religion. And we find this all over the place, and that it's almost never spoken about except for the masonry. But all you have to do is take one look around at the ancient world of what has remained of it, and what is it? Stone monuments. And what were they used for? Religion. Although there's a debate as to the Great Pyramid. Did it have a religious significance or a secular one? It may have been both, but because it really was, as we find today in Islam, there's almost no distinction between. There's no religion is the thing. There was a priest king. He was both a ruler and a religious figure. And so, in the ancient world, what we have discovered is that the central figure of a mystery school, for example, or of a religion, was not necessarily just some god sitting on a throne doing nothing. It could have been a hero who was, for example, we talk about smithcraft. The god Hephaestus has a strong connection to the god Ptah in Egypt. And Ptah is, without a doubt, a central figure of worship. And he is depicted as a smith. He is depicted as a metalworker. Now, in a culture that is interested in weapons, their god would be a metalworker. In a culture that is interested in building massive testimonial to God in stone, their central figure of worship would be the grand architect of the universe. Yeah, that's a demiurge. Yes, certainly involved in intelligent design. I mean, the intelligent designer now. These are active gods. They're not just sitting there surveying. They have an involvement. Interestingly enough, we have this pre-Christian sect called the Mandeans. Some would argue they are not pre-Christian, but I maintain that they are. Their priestly caste, they're called Nazarenes. This is why we have Jesus of Nazareth. He didn't come from a place or live in a place called Nazareth, which has never been determined to have been a real village. This was some, it was a necropolis, or there was a couple of huts there or whatever.
It was a Roman outpost or something like that, yeah.
Yes, but the real reason is because he's supposed to be a Nazarene, which is, as we know from the Old Testament, Nazarite. Samson is a member of a sect, cut its hair and didn't imbibe, and wine was a sacrament, but it was only engaged in like once a year or something, some kind of ritual. So we find the Mandeans that their priestly caste was called the Nazarenes. And the Nazarene, the head of the Nazarene was a carpenter god. So, now we have Jesus the carpenter. One of the epithets for the divine son, the God son, S-U-N, is the carpenter. The architect, the carpenter, the mason, the tecton, this word tecton, that is used to describe Christ only once, as he called the tecton. And from that one mention, that one word, we have this whole thing with, Jesus sawing wood and, and to the ridiculous extreme of the last temptation of Christ, he's actually making crosses. But the word tecton just means someone who fashions something. It doesn't. It could be an artist, some artisan. It could be a mason. It could be a smith. It could be someone who dyes clothing. It's just really not a carpenter. But then we have this whole big biography of this carpenter guy. And oddly enough, however, there is an epithet for other gods called the carpenter. Even Buddha had carpenter epithet. He was a carpenter in one of his lives. This idea of masonry, there's no question that the people who knew how to build the pyramids were viewed as the power mongers or the power brokers of the culture. Not necessarily the ones who are actually doing the building, but the architects, the priests who knew all of the sacred geometry that they would and math that they would need to create such an amazing structure. That knowledge was part of the mysteries. And so within the mysteries is this extraordinary mathematical and Masonic knowledge. They go hand in hand. And so I maintain that in large part, the Masonic religious cult, that goes back thousands of years and can be seen in the product of the Great Pyramid, for example, that through these structures, they are preserving the ancient mystery knowledge, and that they have, therefore, because Masonry of all things has such longevity, they have a major influence on reality, on religious life, on our ideologies, religious ideologies, and that Masons, therefore, had a hand in creating not only the Egyptian pyramids and the religion that went with, if not the pyramids, the Temple of Luxor and all the other magnificent buildings, all the tombs all over Egypt, tombs of Osiris and tombs of the pharaohs, that not only there, but also in Greece, the Masonry, the people who were knowledgeable about Masonic principles were considered to be hierarchy within religion as well. We have, of course, the tradition of Solomon and Hiram Abiff and King of Salem. You know what I'm talking about. The Masonic tradition that links the Old Testament to Masonry. I think there's certainly some validity there. Now, as to the structure that we have today within Freemasonry, that's probably an accretion. Some of the rituals are probably very, very ancient, and there's been great upheavals that have destroyed the lineage along the way, and it had to be reconstructed. So I'm not necessarily claiming that the Scottish Rite is a direct and unbroken lineage from ancient Egypt, but certainly even if they're rediscovering some of these mysteries, these Masonic principles that are hidden in stone, they're definitely bringing that knowledge forward so they're carrying it forward. They're carriers of that knowledge. It's quite fascinating when you consider how much of what is going on in the world today is not really well chronicled, then how much has been lost, and it's just a tremendous amount of knowledge. This whole idea then that everything just kind of sprang out of nowhere that's the fiction.
I agree.
We have ruins of empires, as Count Volney called them, just real empires, though, not just some mud huts digging around underneath there. It's quite fascinating. If you get too caught up in a certain bias, the pagans are all bad, and Christianity is true, and so forth, you will never see the reality of what has gone on this planet. Fortunately for me, when I was a kid, I was exposed to Greek culture and Greek mythology in specific, and so I didn't have that bias. It was something fascinating to look at. And then when I was also raised Christian at the same time, but as I came up in the world and studied Greek civilization in particular, I just thought to myself, well, what gives this particular mythology, the Christian mythology, any more validity than the Greek mythology?
Right.
We've got similar stories of people doing magical and mystical and supernatural things that aren't supposed to happen in real life.
But I think that's all the time we have today, Acharya. I'd like to thank you very much for taking your time and coming on the show and giving us a good treatise on mystery religions. But like we've spoken, she's got tons and tons more on Sons of God, pages after pages.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to really get the details of how some of the stuff I brought up might be shocking to some people, or they're not going to believe it or whatever. But you have to see the details that I bring forth in there. Very detailed. I have, as you know, footnotes for almost every
sentence. Yes.
Yeah, there are hundreds of sources in there, and I was fairly conservative with this book. I tried to incorporate other books for ChristCon because people were always asking me questions. They asked me about Zechariah Sitchin, so I gave a brief mention of Zechariah Sitchin. And actually, had nothing to do with his main thesis, but I just wanted to show people that I was reading these books because everybody's always hitting me with different sources. But with Sons of God, because of the criticisms of ChristCon, I actually use very conservative sources, including the Catholic Encyclopedia.
Yeah, a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah, the Catholic Encyclopedia has admitted quite... To end, we're talking about mysteries, and what a lot of people aren't going to realize is that Christianity is a mystery religion, and that the discussion of Christian mysteries is extremely prevalent amongst the church fathers who are actually responsible for a lot of Christianity, Christian doctrine and dogma. And the Catholic Encyclopedia will admit that Christianity is a mystery religion.
Ah.
It's really worth reading, especially that chapter if you're interested in mystery religions. The Mysterious Brotherhood, maybe one of the more extensive treatises on the subject that you'll ever see. So, all right, thanks a lot, Miguel.
All right, you have a good day now.
Oh, you too, hon.
Bye.